On the surface, it seems that the theme of today's reading focuses on forgiveness, with the woman being accused of adultery or being caught in adultery. And while that theme, which is part of reconciliation or condemnation, that theme is only one part of it. If you put this reading with the other two, whoever put the lectionary together wasn't just thinking of those two themes. They were thinking of a larger theme. And that theme is perseverance and steadfastness in the faith. So let's look at this. Let's look at Isaiah first. Isaiah, this part of Isaiah, was written during the Babylonian captivity. Now, if you remember, the Babylonians invaded Israel and they took the greater population out of Israel and spread them throughout the Babylonian Empire. And at one point, the Jewish people were becoming despondent. They were becoming, depressed. And they asked themselves, why did God abandon us? Why did God leave us? And they thought about it, and they thought about it, and they basically came to realize that the reason why the Babylonians took over was not because God abandoned them, but because they abandoned God. And with that, they started to put their trust back into the Lord. And when they did that, that's when God brought them back home out of captivity. Their thinking was, as long as we trust in the Lord, as long as we put our faith in Him, as long as we live according to the law, God will be with us. In the second reading, Paul takes it one step further. At this stage of the game, Paul has been arrested. He's on his way to Rome. And with that, he's reflecting on his ministry. And he's telling his readers, you know what? I've been arrested. I'm going to Rome, where I'm going to die. I look back on my life, of all the things that have happened, and I realize that it is not me that did that, but that the Lord worked through me. Therefore, I will go to my death, trusting that the Lord will deliver me. I will go to my death, knowing that because of my faith in the Lord, my death will mean something. It will have a purpose, and that purpose is to glorify God. Now remember, these readings were read during a time of Christian persecution. And the early Christians, when they had to go be sacrificed to the lions and whatnot, they went with their heads held high, full of faith, knowing that they were going to die. This leads us into the gospel. The woman caught in adultery knew that because she was caught, she was going to die. And she may have asked God for forgiveness. We don't know. She may have been angry at God, because why was it only her that was brought before Jesus? Where was the man who was also caught in adultery? So there was that, there was the humiliation, there was the anger, and there was the resignation that her life was going to end. And on the way, she probably pleaded for God, if for anything, for justice. God, I know I have sinned. I know I am to die. But let the man die too, because he's just as guilty. What happens? She's forgiven. And the ones who accused her walk away. The whole thing is, if we truly trust in God, God will deliver us. If we abandon God, God will abandon us until we come to our senses. Being St. Patrick's Day, this theme fits perfectly. Look at St. Patrick, born in Scotland. He was abducted by, enemy forces. He was taken to Ireland, made a slave. He lived as a slave for 7 some years until he finally escaped. He became a priest. And what does the Pope say to him? Patrick, I want you to go to Ireland. Could you imagine what's going through Patrick's mind? You want me to go back to the place where they made me a slave. You want me to go back and probably be captured and killed. He does. He does go with the confidence that God will be with him. How do we know that? Well, St. Patrick's known for his Lorica, his confession of faith. And in it, I'd like to read to you just a little small part of it. St. Patrick says, I arise today through a mighty strength, the invocation of the Trinity, through belief in the threeness, through confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation. I arise today through the strength of Christ with his baptism, through the strength of his crucifixion with his burial, through the strength of his resurrection with his ascension, through the strength of his descent to the dead. I arise today through God's strength to lead me, God's might to uphold me, God's wisdom to guide me, God's eye to look before me, God's ear to hear me, God's word to speak to me, God's hand to guard me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me, God's host to secure me, against the snares of devils, against the temptations of vices, against inclinations of nature, against everyone who shall wish me ill, afar and near, alone and in a crowd. I summon today all these powers between me and these evils, against every cruel and merciless power that may oppose my body and my soul. Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ in breadth, length, and height, Christ in the very heart of every man who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of every man who speaks of me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. I arise today through a mighty strength, the invocation of the Trinity, through belief in the threeness, through confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation. Salvation is of the Lord. Salvation is of the Lord. Salvation is of Christ. May your salvation, O Lord, be ever with us. Patrick, through his trust, became one of the most strongest church figures that the church has known. That woman who was condemned, legend has it that she was Mary Magdalene. She became one of the strongest believers in Jesus. For you and I, place the trust in the Lord. Persevere in the faith, knowing that God will protect you because he loves you. Love him in return.